So picture this: the Galactic Council chamber, normally a place of dignified debate and pompous speeches, currently looked like a chicken coop after someone tossed in a firecracker. And let me tell you, when you get 300 different species all panicking at once, it sounds less like a governing body and more like a zoo during feeding time. Ambassador Quilnax of the Zenthari Empire was practically vibrating through 17 different colors of terror, which, for a species that communicates partially through bioluminescence, was the equivalent of screaming in caps lock with about 50 exclamation points. His translator was working overtime, spitting out phrases like, "We're all going to die," and "Why did we even build that facility?" in rapid succession, the reason for all this delightful chaos. Maximum Security Facility Omega-7 had just experienced what the bureaucrats were calling a minor containment anomaly. Translation: something very, very bad had broken out, and now it was loose. And when I say loose, I mean galaxy-threatening, civilization-ending, make you wish you had stayed in bed this millennia kind of loose. The something in question was a Void Stalker. Now, if you're not familiar with Void Stalkers, congratulations on being adorably naive. These things were the galaxy's apex predator, the creature that made other apex predators whimper and file for early retirement. They were the reason the Krell Dominion was now just a footnote in history books. They were why the warrior clans of Thoraxis Prime held annual, "We survived another year without seeing one" festivals. Council member Vreshkan, a four-armed Gakorian who normally prided himself on his calm demeanor, was currently using all four hands to frantically scroll through historical records of Void Stalker attacks. His face had gone from its usual sage green to a rather unhealthy shade of, "Oh sweet merciful stars, we're doomed," gray. The last time one of these was loose, he announced, his voice cracking, it chose the Supreme War Master of the Draxian Armada as its prey. They found him 3 cycles later, curled in a corner, babbling about eyes in the darkness. And that was after he'd defeated the Hive Wars single-handedly. Meanwhile, approximately 7 sectors away on Waystation Kepler 9, Marcus Chen was having what he considered a pretty decent day. The 32-year-old cargo hauler was kicked back in the pilot's seat of his beat-up freighter, the Lucky Dragon, with his boots propped up on the console and a burrito of extremely questionable origin in one hand. AC/DC single quote S Back in Black was blasting through the ship speakers at a volume that would make any sensible species question humanity's hearing capacity. Marcus was happily headbanging along, completely oblivious to the 17 increasingly frantic messages piling up on his comm system. The burrito, which he'd purchased from a Galaxian food vendor for 2 credits, tasted like it might have been made sometime during the previous administration. Possibly the one before that. Marcus didn't care. He'd eaten worse during his college years, and that mystery meat actually had a certain charm to it. Kind of like spicy regret with a hint of, "What was I thinking?" His comm system dinged for the 18th time. Then the 19th. Marcus ignored it with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned that most urgent messages were just his dispatch manager asking if he'd filed his flight plan paperwork. Spoiler alert, he hadn't. Finally, during the guitar solo, Marcus sighed and jabbed the comm button with his burrito hand, leaving a small salsa stain on the console. "Yeah, what?" he said, chewing. The message that came through was from Station Command, and it was impressively panicky. Something about an immediate evacuation, a Galaxy-class threat, and seeking shelter immediately. Marcus read it twice, shrugged, and took another bite of his burrito. "Probably another drill," he muttered, turning the music back up. Now, to be fair to all those hyperventilating council members, Void Stalkers weren't just your garden-variety space monsters. These things had a resume that would make a serial killer look like an underachiever. Let's take a little stroll down Nightmare Lane, shall we? The Horthack Collective, a hive mind of approximately 40 billion individuals spread across 12 worlds, decided to hunt a Void Stalker for sport about 3,000 years ago. Emphasis on decided, past tense. The entire collective went dark within a week. Every single one of them. When rescue teams finally arrived, they found 40 billion bodies, all of them displaying the exact same expression of absolute, mind-breaking terror. The investigation concluded with a very scientific assessment of, "Nope, never again," burn the reports. Then there was the siege of Kardashev Station, a military fortress designed to withstand planetary-scale bombardment. A single Void Stalker got inside. 3 days later, 15,000 elite soldiers were found in the cafeteria, huddled together like scared children, most of them catatonic. The fortress itself was completely undamaged. The soldiers' minds, however, were thoroughly demolished. Here's how these delightful creatures operated. First, they'd choose a victim. Just one. Call it professional focus. Then they'd begin the psychological phase of the hunt, flooding their target's mind with visions of every fear, every nightmare, every what-if scenario that ever kept them awake at night. Most species broke within hours. The Void Stalker would feed on that terror, growing stronger, before moving in for the physical kill, and they never, ever gave up. Once a Void Stalker locked onto its prey, it would pursue them across star systems, through time dilation, past black holes if necessary. Persistence hunters didn't have anything on these things. Now, was the galaxy overreacting a teensy bit? Maybe. But when you're dealing with a creature that literally weaponizes existential dread and has a perfect kill record spanning millennia, a little panic seems almost reasonable. Almost. The Void Stalker materialized in the lower docking bay of Waystation Kepler 9 like a nightmare-given substance. Its form was difficult to describe, mostly because anyone who looked directly at it for too long started questioning their life choices. Let's just say it was big, shadowy, had too many appendages that moved in ways that violated several laws of physics, and radiated an aura of pure malevolence. It extended its consciousness across the station, scanning thousands of lifeforms. This was the moment. The selection. The choosing of prey. There was a Kravaxian berserker in Bay 12, 7 feet of muscle and rage with acid for blood. The Void Stalker sensed it and moved on. Too easy. A Thoraxian warrior clan was loading cargo in Bay 15, each one a decorated veteran of the frontier wars. The creature dismissed them with barely a psychic glance. Boring. In the station's security center, a whole platoon of armed Gikorian soldiers sat at their posts, weapons primed. The Void Stalker yawned, metaphorically speaking, and then it found him, Marcus Chen. Human. Cargo hauler. Currently finishing what appeared to be a sandwich of truly alarming composition while humming off-key to ancient Earth music, the Void Stalker paused. Scanned again. There was something about this one. Something that called to its predatory instincts. It couldn't quite identify what, but every hunting instinct it possessed screamed that this was the prey it wanted. The creature locked on. Back at the council chamber, they'd managed to hack into the station's surveillance feeds and were watching with mounting horror. No, Quilnax groaned, his bioluminescence flickering between orange and purple, which roughly translated to horrified disbelief. It's choosing someone. Can you identify the target? A junior analyst pulled up the feed. Yes, Ambassador. It appears to be a human. Name, Marcus Chen. Occupation, independent cargo hauler. Current activity. She squinted at the screen, eating and ignoring 17 emergency broadcasts. A human? Vreshkan's 4 arms flailed in confusion. Why would it choose a human? They're barely rated class 4 on the sentience scale. No offense to humans, but they're not exactly known for being galactic threats. That thing doesn't choose prey based on threat level, another council member chimed in. It chooses based on some criteria we've never understood. On the surveillance feed, Marcus had just discovered a pickle he'd forgotten about. He looked genuinely delighted. He had absolutely no idea he'd just become the target of the galaxy's most feared predator. The Void Stalker settled into the shadows of the docking bay, directly beneath the Lucky Dragon, and began its work. This was the part it excelled at. The psychological breakdown. The terror that preceded the kill. It reached out with its consciousness and plunged directly into Marcus Chen's mind, flooding it with visions of cosmic horror. Endless voids. Incomprehensible geometries. The heat death of the universe. That feeling you get when you remember something embarrassing you did in middle school, but amplified by a factor of 10,000. Marcus, who had just switched from his sandwich to leftover Chinese food from the station's questionably licensed restaurant, suddenly paused mid-bite. "Huh," he said, rubbing his stomach. "That's weird." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a bottle of antacid tablets, crunching 2 of them thoughtfully. "Knew I shouldn't have gotten the shrimp fried rice. That's on me." The Void Stalker, confused, intensified its assault. It showed Marcus visions of his own mortality. The inevitable decay of all things. The meaninglessness of existence in an uncaring universe. Marcus burped and went back to his fried rice. Okay, new strategy. The creature shifted tactics, releasing fear pheromones into the air, a technique that had driven entire battalions into gibbering madness. The atmosphere in the cargo bay grew thick with an almost visible miasma of dread. Marcus wrinkled his nose. "Man, something smells funky in here." He stood up, walked over to the airlock controls, and cracked open a ventilation port. Probably something died in the ducts again. Need to get that checked out. The Void Stalker sat in stunned silence. This had never happened before. Not once in 3 millennia of hunting had prey just taken antacid and opened a window. Now, here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy hadn't quite figured out yet: they evolved on a death world. A planet where the weather actively tried to kill them, where tiny invisible organisms could end them, where they had to outwit creatures with claws, fangs, venom, and significantly better physical stats. Humans had survived by being too stubborn to acknowledge when they should be terrified. Also, Marcus had once worked retail during Black Friday. After that, cosmic horror was basically a light Tuesday. Back at the council chamber, the surveillance team was getting concerned for entirely different reasons. "Should he be screaming by now?" one analyst asked nervously. "He should be catatonic by now," Vreshkan corrected, all 4 hands gripping his chair. The psychological assault should have begun immediately. On screen, Marcus was now doing what appeared to be minor stretches while waiting for his food to settle. Is he exercising? Quilnax's color shifted to a confused beige. "I think he's just vibing," the analyst said weakly. The Void Stalker, hidden in shadows below, was beginning to experience something it hadn't felt in millennia: doubt. The Void Stalker had enough of subtlety. If the psychological approach wasn't working, it was time for the direct method. Time to remind this soft little mammal what true terror looked like. It manifested in the cargo bay in full horrific glory. Shadows peeled away from the walls, coalescing into its nightmarish form. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in an instant. Emergency lights flickered and died. The creature rose up, all writhing appendages and too many joints bending in the wrong directions, and released a screech that existed in frequencies most species couldn't even perceive without their sanity taking a permanent vacation. Marcus, who had been elbow-deep in the warp drive's coolant system, looked up from his work. "Oh, come on, Dave," he said, sounding more annoyed than afraid. "Seriously? I told you those YouTube prank videos would rot your brain." The Void Stalker paused mid-screech. "Dave? Who in the 7 hells was Dave?" "Look, buddy, I appreciate the commitment to the bit. The costume's actually pretty good." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, squinting at the creature. "But I've got a delivery deadline, and I'm not in the mood." The creature screamed again, louder this time, extending razor-sharp appendages that had once eviscerated a Draxian battle tank. Marcus sighed, picked up a wrench from his toolkit, and chucked it at the Void Stalker with the casual accuracy of someone who'd spent years throwing tools at malfunctioning equipment. The wrench bonked the creature directly in what might have been its face. There was a moment of absolute silence. The galaxy's most feared predator, the extinction-level threat, the nightmare made manifest, just got hit with a 3/4-inch torque wrench. And it hurt. Actually hurt. The Void Stalker let out a sound that was less terrifying screech and more confused yelp, then retreated back into the shadows, utterly baffled. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Marcus called after it. "Tell Dave I'm not falling for it. And tell him he still owes me 20 credits from poker night." He turned back to his repairs, muttering about people having too much free time. At the council chamber, Vreshkan had gone completely gray. One of his hands was still frozen in mid-gesture, the other three hung limply at his sides. Did that human just... He couldn't finish the sentence. Throw a wrench at it, Quilnax completed, his bioluminescence having gone completely dark in shock. He threw a wrench. At a void stalker. And it worked. I need to reconsider my entire understanding of the universe, another council member whispered. The void stalker retreated to the darkest corner of the docking bay and did something it had never done in its entire existence. It questioned itself, what just happened? In 3,000 years of hunting, across 100 star systems, it had never encountered a species that simply didn't fear it. This wasn't bravery. Bravery was being afraid and acting anyway. This human wasn't brave. He was just genuinely unbothered. The creature accessed the station's data network, something it rarely needed to do, and began researching. Humans. Earth. Origin world classification. Oh. Oh no, Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. The Void Stalker paused. Class 12? That was the same rating as Kroth-Zul, the planet where they literally mined nightmare fuel. Humans evolved there, it kept reading. Okay, so Earth had creatures called hippopotamuses that killed more humans annually than apex predators. There were spiders that could kill with a bite. Microscopic organisms that could end you. Plants that caused pain so severe it drove beings to self-termination. Storms that could level cities. Ocean creatures with enough venom to kill hundreds, and humans just lived there. Casually. They kept the spiders as pets sometimes. They surfed the killer storms. They had something called Australia, that was essentially a continental-scale hazard zone, and people vacationed there. The Void Stalker sat there, processing this information, experiencing what could only be described as an existential crisis. It had chosen to hunt something that evolved in a place where everything was actively trying to kill it, and the something in question had survived by apparently just ignoring danger and hoping it went away. The creature was beginning to suspect it had made a terrible mistake. No. Absolutely not. The Void Stalker refused to accept defeat. It was the apex predator of the known galaxy. It had toppled empires. It would not be bested by one stubborn primate with questionable taste in food and music. Time for the ultimate technique. The Void Stalker reached deep into Marcus Chen's subconscious, sifting through memories and neural patterns, searching for his deepest, darkest fear. The thing that would finally break him, and there it was. The creature began to shift, its form condensing, reshaping, until standing in the cargo bay was a 5'6" woman with immaculate hair, designer clothes, and an expression that could freeze helium. Marcus, she said in a voice that dripped with false sweetness, we need to talk about our relationship. Marcus, who had been replacing a fuse panel, went absolutely rigid. He turned slowly, his face draining of color. Oh God. Oh no. No, no, no. He actually screamed this time. An actual, genuine scream of pure terror. The Void Stalker felt a surge of triumph. Finally. Success. Jessica? Marcus backed away, hands up. Look, I thought we agreed that we were done talking. You got the apartment, the coffee maker, and my signed first edition of... Then he stopped. Squinted. Tilted his head. Wait a second. He stepped closer, examining the figure. Jessica's left eye had that little gold fleck. You don't have that. And she always wore that specific perfume. He sniffed. You smell like burnt ozone and existential dread. His posture relaxed immediately. Oh, thank God, you're just the weird space monster. The Void Stalker stared at him in disbelief. Seriously, I'll take tentacle horror over another conversation about my emotional availability any day of the week. Marcus actually laughed, the tension draining out of his shoulders. You almost had me there, buddy. Good try though. The creature stood there, still wearing the form of Marcus's ex-girlfriend, experiencing what could only be described as complete and utter demoralization. It had literally transformed into this human's worst fear, and his response was relief that it was only a galaxy-destroying monster. What kind of species was this? Marcus watched the defeated creature shimmer back into its original shadowy form, which now seemed to slouch in a distinctly dejected manner. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You want a beer?" The Void Stalker didn't respond immediately, but one of its appendages sort of gestured in what might have been confusion or possibly acceptance. Marcus took that as a yes. He grabbed 2 bottles from his mini fridge, popped them open, and set one on a cargo crate near the creature. Then he sat down on another crate, took a long drink, and sighed. "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but you seem to be having a rough day." The Void Stalker's form rippled. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal and whispered secrets, but there was something almost vulnerable in it. "I have hunted for 3 millennia. I have never failed. Until you." "Yeah, well." Marcus shrugged. "Humans are kind of weird like that. We evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to murder us, so we got really good at just ignoring things that should terrify us. It's not bravery, it's more like selective awareness. If we stopped to freak out about everything that could kill us, we'd never get anything done." The creature absorbed this information, tentatively extending an appendage to the beer bottle. It managed to tip some of the liquid into what might have been a mouth. "Your species is terrifying," it said finally. "Not because you are strong, but because you simply refuse to acknowledge when you should be prey." Marcus grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, 2 beings sharing a drink and a mutual frustration with how the universe worked. "You know what?" the Void Stalker said. "I respect that. It is horrifying, but I respect it." When the Galactic Council's emergency response team finally arrived at Waystation Kepler 9, weapons drawn and shields at maximum, they were treated to a sight that would be discussed in xenopsychology classes for the next century. Marcus Chen and the Void Stalker were sitting side by side on cargo crates, watching what appeared to be an old Earth movie on a battered tablet. There were empty beer bottles scattered around them. No, see, that's the thing," Marcus was saying, gesturing at the screen. "The shark isn't the real villain. It's the mayor who kept the beaches open." The Void Stalker's form rippled in what might have been agreement. Quilnax, who had personally led the response team, felt his bioluminescence flicker through colors that didn't have names in any known language. "What in the name of all that is holy am I looking at?" Marcus glanced up. "Oh, hey. You guys hear about the false alarm?" "Yeah, everything's fine. This is Fluffy." He patted one of the creature's shadowy appendages. "Fluffy," Vreshkan repeated weakly, all 4 arms hanging limp. "Yeah, he was having a bad day, so we talked it out. Turns out he's pretty cool once you get past the whole cosmic horror thing. He's gonna crash here for a while, help me with cargo loading. Those tentacles are great for heavy lifting." The Void Stalker, apparently resigned to its new identity as Fluffy, made a sound that might have been a sigh. Within a week, the Galactic Council had passed Resolution 8847H, informally known as the "Just Don't Mess with Humans" Accord. The official wording was more diplomatic, something about humans being classified as a Category X unpredictable species, but the intent was clear. If a species could accidentally befriend the galaxy's most feared predator by offering it beer and ignoring its threats, who knew what else they were capable of? And Marcus? He still didn't understand what all the fuss was about. He'd just made a new friend. Fluffy was great company, didn't complain about his music choices, and actually appreciated his jokes, though he did have to explain to the creature that no, it couldn't eat the annoying dispatcher who kept asking about his overdue paperwork. Some things were off limits, even for apex predators.